What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Tech 1-2 podcast. I'm your host, John Kampas. Today, I'm super excited. We have Josh from COEO in the studio today talking about business connectivity and how it also relates to business continuity. So let's get started. Thanks so much for being in the studio today, Josh. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, John. I'm really looking forward to today's podcast.
Yeah, same here. So tell us a little bit about COEO and what you do there.
Yeah, so I've been with the organization about 6.5 years now. I'm a channel manager, so I support our partner ecosystems, such as EMPIST. We are really all things wide area network. So we do ISP service, so internet connectivity. We lease wholesale lease last mile infrastructure, provide our support in the actual internet service over that. We have a host of voice products, everything from your cloud communications, contact center, SIP trunking, PRI, etc., as well as managed SD-WAN and managed security stack off of that as well.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I mean, that's a full gamut of all services related to connectivity.
Oh, yeah. We've really built out that portfolio of products and services to best serve our customers, and started as a voice carrier and got a lot of demand from our clients to continue to expand, and that's what we've done.
Well, what I really want to talk about, and something that our audience has really asked us about, is the SD-WAN. You just mentioned that is part of one of those core services. So what exactly is an SD-WAN?
Yep, so SD-WAN stands for Software-Defined Wide Area Network. And at its core, and the initial intention of it was to create a more cost-effective private network. So organizations historically had relied on point-to-point services, MPLS, ENS networks to connect all of their office ecosystems in a secure manner. One of the main limitations with that is you had connectivity you were paying for that could only be used to transport between sites. So you had no access to internet, no local breakout. It was cumbersome. It was very, very expensive as well. So SD-WAN kind of hit the market to address that limitation. And with SD-WAN, it's building overlay network. So rather than having to purchase something for a dedicated private network, you put in a service, and that service will build all of your private connectivity. It removes you from your hub and spoke model, so you don't have a head end with a bunch of tentacles. Now everyone can communicate, talk to each other, and then it allowed for local breakout since you're deploying that over any internet connection. So
I like the sound of that.
As the market continues to expand and develop, we're seeing really a massive shift away from the MPLS into a technology that provides you more value for less money. So that's kind of the core of it.
So you talk about this hub and spoke model.
Yep.
The traditional, you'd have point-to-points, you'd have MPLS circuits, and then you talk about SD-WAN. SD-WAN is providing, you mentioned, reliability, failover, a bunch of other functionality and features. But you mentioned it's also 60 to 70%, potentially a 60 to 70% reduction in cost for these organizations. How can that be?
How is that possible?
It has almost everything to do with the infrastructure. So with MPLS, you would have internet connectivity and MPLS, or you would create a hub and spoke model where all your locations are pulling their internet from a single pipe, right? And what SD-WAN has done is said, hey, instead of having to have two circuits, one for internet, one for private network, we're just going to build both networks over the same connectivity. Those MPLS networks were built over dedicated infrastructure, which is much more expensive than your broadband, your cables, your DSLs, things like that, and it forced organizations to have 2-3 separate circuits in place. With SD-WAN, since you can utilize it for internet connectivity, private networking, etc., it allowed you to decrease that to 1 or 2 circuits in place with getting the same end result. So right off the bat, if you remove MPLS, you've saved whatever that cost is.
So we talk about the software side of it. The software is enabling all this technology. In this hub and spoke model, what would happen in an environment if all the internet was funneling through a single site? Let's say in Chicago, and we had San Francisco, we had Miami, we had Austin, Texas. If Chicago went down, what would happen to those other sites?
Yeah, and that really brings up the business continuity piece that SD-WAN is providing. So not only is SD-WAN going to automatically fail over internet at a single site, but compared to your old hub and spoke where you're pulling internet from a centrally managed location, that's a single point of failure in your network. If that connection goes down, not only is it impacting that facility, but every single site that's connecting back to access that circuit is now down. With the SD-WAN, since we can now enable local breakout on internet without having to add a tremendous amount of cost at that site, each site is now independent. So you're no longer, if Austin goes down, Chicago's okay, and vice versa. So you're building in a more robust and reliable network, not only from a local failover standpoint, but no longer having those single points of failure in your ability to access the internet.
That's way better. Thank you.
But how would you handle the argument where organizations will say, you know what, yeah, we have everything in the cloud, we have our primary internet, we don't need any secondary service or failover. If something happens, we'll just have our staff leave, go to the nearest coffee shop, or go home and work from home. I mean, what do you say to that?
Depending on your business, that could be a viable disaster type ecosystem. But most organizations don't want an unsecure access to those applications. So you go to the coffee shop, you're on a public Wi-Fi, you're hoping that there's no malicious actors that are sitting there and capturing that data or any of that. But those are real risks in today's world. With that SD-WAN fabric and bringing in secondary connections and making sure the survivability exists at that site level, that's not only going to help you from having to send people home and hope that they're doing what you've asked them to.
Yeah.
I mean, are you working?
Yeah.
It's not like...
But it's also giving you that security, right? You know that your network is operating the way that you've configured it. We're monitoring those things for you. We're taking a look at those intruders who may be trying to access the data. We're building in your VPN tunnels to your SaaS applications. So it is encrypted so that it's not going over public internet. And once you step outside of that office environment, you run those risks. Now, we do have options like SASE thin clients that really extend that SD-WAN network to those endpoints. And we have seen that as a common trend for organizations that say, you know what, we are cloud-based, and we are going to be supporting remote workers and hybrid workforce, and we understand the value of the high uptime and the security, but our office environment is no longer what we live and die by. And in that ecosystem, we have a number of clients who are deploying the SASE model, where if one of their employees is in an office, that SD-WAN fabric will take over, it'll do all of the routing, it'll own that, and as soon as that individual is no longer sitting behind that network, that client intelligently assesses that and will then set up all that VPNing, all of the security, all of that advanced routing optimization that lives at the office on the endpoint.
It's safe here now, but there's still urban decay.
Oftentimes people are working in a distributed workforce and they're not considering the connectivity side of it and how they need to keep that secured as it would be if they were in their offices. So let's talk a little bit about that. Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. So historically, organizations treated their security at the end user level with an endpoint protection. You go out and you get any number of options, you deploy that locally, and the assumption is that you're now secured. But if you look at the way that those solutions were built, you're assuming you have perimeter security, you're kind of doing all the blocking and tackling up front, and that was your last kind of ditch effort. With the SASE client, you're getting that same enterprise office security from a perimeter standpoint. You're taking advantage of building out your VPN tunnel so that internet is not your issue, right? And it's going to essentially extend what your traditional office type ecosystem is now to any number of endpoints that exist. So it gives not only the security, but also the visibility onto what's occurring at those endpoints. And we've seen a huge influx as organizations are supporting remote and hybrid workforce. You need to make sure that not just the endpoint, right, that someone's not going to plug in a USB in there and it's going to download something, but that you're connecting with these applications that are living in the cloud and that transit is secure. Your endpoint security may protect your computer, but it's not protecting the internet traffic, right? There's a lot of these areas in business where that data is transferring that it is unsecure. And, unfortunately, a lot of businesses assume if I go and buy Salesforce licensing, that everything that's being transferred is somehow secure, but it's going over public internet. So you have to secure and encrypt that data, and SASE is a way to do that in a very manageable and scalable approach across a distributed organization.
Absolutely. I mean, those are great points because the connectivity, people say, well, it's secured through SSL, but when they're connecting through a public Wi-Fi,
It's not.
yeah, it's not.
It's not. I assure you.
If you read the end user license agreement for many of these platforms, the limitations of liability are pretty extensive.
Yes.
They're not liable for what happens.
Anything.
So from a IT perspective and even from, an IT governance, by controlling the connectivity to these platforms, so whether it's on-premise, whether it's distributed in the cloud, you can do some advanced security in many of these platforms, restricting by IP,
Yep.
GeoIP, making sure that the endpoints have the appropriate security, right? They have the endpoint protection.
Yep.
They have current patch levels. What are you seeing? I mean, are you seeing the same? Because
Yeah,
we've
so
seen a
we're-
lot of that.
We're building out zero trust networking. So the days of this IP or this MAC address are trusted and they can access whatever group policy you've built are long gone. We're building in two-factor authentication to these applications, leveraging this, where, to your point, on these thin clients that we're deploying out with our SASE solution, we're taking a look. We're making sure that their endpoint security is up to date if they're going to be able to access this. So we're going in and doing an inspection every time that endpoint is trying to access something. One of the big issues with creating these trusted networks is they can be exposed. A malicious actor can get in there, they can impersonate that person, someone could lose their computer, and now anything that they hit safe password for can be accessed and there's no control. So we've seen a massive uptick in organizations not only leveraging that SASE for making sure that these endpoints are secure and they're following corporate policy and things like that, but really to protect the organizational data, not just the end user. And that's a trend that I think is understated and organizations aren't exploring enough. I don't think they fully understand the risks that do exist as they're supporting these distributed environments, or what technologies are available to help them sleep a little bit better at night.
I should get some sleep.
So companies, oftentimes traditional ISPs, internet service providers, would have companies sign long-term agreements. And there's many clients that we have too that did like 10-year deals on traditional internet connectivity. And as things evolved and there was this big transformation, as we mentioned, the cloud and now having to consider security, they're stuck with a lot of these things. So what advice would you give to any business owner out there that knows they need to make improvements? They're stuck in some sort of long-term agreement. Are there ways they can get around some of this stuff, or maybe leverage
Absolutely.
different technologies?
So that's a common issue that our customers run into, and just like most other folks in our space, we do operate on, contractual agreements, right, to provide service. And our standard contract is 36 months on average. We offer 12-month, 24-month pricing and contracts as well, but 36 is kind of the standard, and I don't recommend folks invest any more than about 36. And the reason is as technology is changing, you do get stuck and you may be outdated. Now, we do have a number of ways to work around that. So SD-WAN is a great one. So you're stuck with a specific internet service and it may not quite be meeting what you need, may not have the security, or you may even have legacy MPLS, etc. You can still layer in the SD-WAN, take advantage of all these benefits from the security, the ability to have dual networks over any connectivity. You can integrate your MPLS. We can use that as our primary route, but now you've got a secondary private network over your internet. So these organizations who may have locked in and thought they were getting a great rate and now they feel a little bit handcuffed, we can still help them, right?
Okay.
We can design kind of that makeshift environment, help them create a sunsetting program for whatever the outdated ecosystem is at no risk to them. So utilize what you have today, and throughout your terms and interactions with COEO, will help you get to the end result you want without it costing you an arm and a leg or facing early termination penalties, et cetera.
Good. So it isn't a rip and replace.
No,
Okay.
we can integrate with whatever you have today and build out what that future should look like.
Well, fantastic. Well, Josh, I really appreciate having you in the studio today. Any closing thoughts for the audience?
Any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would just say if you haven't explored SD-WAN, and a lot of organizations think of it as we have to be these massive distributed organizations to take advantage of it. We have clients with single sites who are taking advantage of it from a business continuity standpoint for the failover, uptime, the private connections into their SaaS application. So anyone who is listening, if you haven't explored it, I do recommend educating yourself and seeing if there would be some value for your business.
Well, fantastic. Once again, thank you for being in the studio. Please check in for our latest podcast, and we'll see you soon.